All right, so welcome back. Today we're going to be making a little NPC here that walks around inside their own little boundary, and if we are the player and we get within range, they're going to stop so that we can have a little chat with them, just like that. So there we go. Also, if they run into a collider, then they're going to change direction. We'll talk about making dialogues for this NPC next time, but for now, there we go. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. So today I want to make a little NPC that is going to patrol in a little area, and then when it hits something, it's going to choose a new direction, and when the player gets within a certain range, it's going to stop so that the player can talk to it. So in order to test this, I'm going to go to my scenes folder here. I'm going to make a new scene, and I'm just going to call this new scene, no, I don't want a script. I'm just going to call this new scene like NPC test or something like that, or even just testing area. We can use this to test other things too. So we're going to create a new scene. I'm going to call this testing area, and then we'll open this up. And let's see what I need in my testing area. So the first thing I want to do is change my camera background because I hate that default Unity blue. I don't know why. It just bugs me. It's a little bit darker. There we go. We don't need timeline, but we will need animation. So let's dock animation down here. Go back to scene. Now for what our NPC is going to look like, there's only the one character that comes with this art pack, but there is a blank NPC, and it's called NPC test. It's this little naked dude, and we're going to use this little guy. So I already have it set to point no filter, and I have it set to no compression, but I'm going to change the sprite mode from single to multiple, and I'll apply that, and then go to the sprite editor. And there's 4 columns and 4 rows. So I'm going to slice this grid by cell count, 4 columns, 4 rows, and slice. And you can see that this generates them just like that. And I'm going to apply. And let's get out of here. So I'm going to grab one of these. Yep, pixels per unit is set correctly. I'm going to grab one of these and just pull it into my scene. I'm going to name this NPC. Now, because I want my NPC to move randomly inside of a defined area, I'm going to actually have the NPC be a few different components that are part of one thing. So I'm going to create a new empty game object, and this empty game object is going to be called NPC holder, and I'm going to set it to 000 for now. Now, the NPC holder is going to carry an NPC with it, and it's also going to carry a bounds object. So I'm also going to set the NPC to 000 for ease of use. And then on the NPC holder, I'm going to create a new empty object, and I'm going to call this bounds. And then bounds is going to have a couple different things. I want to be able to debug this, so I'm going to give this bounds object just a really simple sprite. So I'll add a sprite renderer, and for the sprite here, just in my art file, I'm going to right click, I'm going to create sprite, and I'll just create a little square, and I don't need to rename it or anything. My bounds, it's going to get a sprite of a square, and you can see that this appears behind the character. That's just Unity deciding that at random. Right now they're both on the same sorting layer, so I'm going to leave the bounds on default, and I'm going to put the NPC on the player layer. And cool. Now for my bounds here, I'm going to add another component, which is a box collider 2D. Now with the bound selected, I'm going to use my size change tool, and I'm just going to change it up to however big I want it to be. And to make sure that I know it's a debug thing, I'm going to put my color to be kind of this mostly transparent teal. And if I look over at my game view, you can see that I can just barely make out the bounds there. Now, what I we'll probably end up doing is add as part of the script for the NPC, just a little method to deactivate the sprite renderer. Set sprite renderer.enabled to be false at the beginning of the game so that you don't actually see this, but so it's still present for debug purposes. I haven't done a lot of stuff with debug like this, but this is one way that you can do it. Another way would be by using the gizmos, the onDraw gizmos commands. I kind of like doing it this way, but onDraw gizmos is probably better. I'm honestly not sure which one's more memory performant. Anyway, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make my animations for my NPC. So on my NPC, this is going to get a few components. It's going to get an animator, and it's also going to get a rigid body 2D. Rigid body 2D, I'm going to make sure to set my gravity to 0. I'm going to set my constraints to freeze the rotation, collision detection to continuous, and I want this to never sleep. And I can probably, yeah, I'll leave it to dynamic. Alright, now when I'm creating my animations, I've done this before for the player and for the log and for the little ogre. So I'm going to fast forward through this, but I'm going to create the 4 animation clips just like I've done before. So the 4 animation clips I'm going to create are going to be walk left, walk right, walk up, walk down. One thing I want to do though is I want to make sure that I'm keeping things nice and organized. So this is going to go in the animations folder. I'll make a new folder inside here. I'll call this NPC. And this first animation I'm going to make is going to be walk up. Alright. Now in my NPC test, looks like walk up is the 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like it's 11. It's 8, 9, 10, and 11. So I'll just grab those, pull them in, expand this to 0.3, then grab the first frame, copy, go to 0.4 and paste. Now if I play this, it looks pretty natural. Now I'm going to repeat this method with the other 3 animations. So I'm going to fast forward for that. Okay, so now that I have those animations done, I'm going to make sure that I have my NPC selected. I'm going to go to my animator and I'm going to delete these here. Okay, well, for some reason that didn't delete it. Now I'm going to create a new state from a blend tree. And my blend tree, I'm going to rename this to walking. I'm not going to put in idles for my little NPC here. I'm thinking kind of like the way that Final Fantasy used to do it. A Link to the Past, which is my inspiration for this, has a few different kinds of NPCs. So one kind of NPC that they have is like Princess Zelda when she's in the sanctuary, Sahasrara, which I think is the sage's name, and then the other sages, they're essentially the same thing as a sign. It's just instead of having a sign, they have a character model that is slightly animated. But in Kakariko Village, there are some NPCs that walk around that you can talk to. And I want to make one like the one that can walk around. Now, if you wanted to make one that's just stationary and just gives out information, it's essentially the same code as what we did for the sign. So yeah, so in my walking here, I'm going to double click on that to open my blend tree. And I'm going to create a couple new parameters, one for move X and one for move Y. So float, move X, and I know I'm being inconsistent with this. Last time I think I called it lowercase m move X and lowercase m move Y. So being inconsistent. So I'm going to call this a simple 2D directional. I'm going to add a new motion field. I'm going to set these on move X and move Y. And that first motion field from animation NPC, doesn't matter which one you put in first, I'm just going to put in walk down. I'm going to add a new motion field. And this one is going to be walk left. And another new motion field, and this one is walk right. And one more, and this one's walk up. Now, unlike with the player, I don't need to worry about these diagonals because I'm specifically only going to let my NPC walk in the 4 cardinal directions. They're not going to be walking diagonally. So move X. So walk down is when move X is 0 and move Y is -1. Walk left is when move x is -1 and y is 0. Walk right is when y is 1, or x is 1 and y is 0. And then up is when x is 0 and y is 1. Now if you grab this little thing, you can kind of go and make sure that they're all in the right orders. Okay, cool. So now, next thing I need to do is make a script to do my logic. So just to kind of talk it out first, the basics behind my logic is I want my little duder here, I want them, he or she, to choose a direction and then walk in that direction until one of a few things happens. Either they reach the end of the boundary that they're in which case they should choose a new direction and walk that way. They collide with something, or the player comes in their range. If the player comes in their range, I want them to stop. So I'm going to go to my scripts here, and in my scripts I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call this NPC, and I'm just going to create a new C# script, and I'm going to call this like, let's call it bounded NPC, so that we can keep this separate from if you wanted to add anything extra to a stationary NPC. So I'm going to open this up in Visual Studio. I haven't used Visual Studio in a hot minute, so it's going to take a second for that to load up, and I'll meet you back here when it does. Alright, so my bounded NPC, I actually want this to inherit some of the interactable behavior. So I'm going to make this inherit from interactable, because I want to have that in range and the onTrigger enter for when the player enters its range. Now I'm going to make a new method here, and this is going to be the method for it to choose which direction it wants to go. So we're going to call this void change direction, and essentially all this is going to do is pick a random number. So we're going to say int direction equals random dot range, and it's going to be between 0 and 4. So there's 0, 1, 2, or 3 are the possibilities. Now we're going to use a switch statement. We could use just ifs and else ifs, but we haven't used a switch statement yet in this tutorial, so I thought it would kind of be a nice thing to show you. When you're trying to decide between a few defined categories, and you want some behavior for those defined categories, you can use if and else ifs, or sometimes I think it's easier, or at least more readable, to use a switch statement. So I'm going to switch, and I'm going to switch on direction, and my case is here. Did I do that wrong? Oh, it's just that it's empty. My case is here, so I'm going to have case 0. I'm just going to add a break to these cases just so I can get them down. And then case 1, break, and then case 2, break, case 3, break. And this seems a little bit out of the ordinary for the way that C# is formatted syntactically. And this is because this was added later in C# than when most of the syntax was, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, and then the last one I want to add is a default case. So when you're making a switch, you always want to make sure that you're ending each case with a break so that nothing happens, so that it leaks into the next case. And you also want to make sure that you have a default case so that there's always a way for the script to exit. So case 0. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to declare a vector variable for the direction I want the player to move. So I'm going to call this a private vector2 direction. Actually, let's make this a vector3 because we're going to be playing around with the transform, so we might as well do this direction. Now, if it's 0, I'm just going to randomly say that the 0 is walking to the right. Did I spell this differently? D-I-R, oh, I can't have this called direction. I'll call this direction vector. There we go. So walking to the right, this is going to be direction vector is equal to vector3 dot right, which is 1, 0, 0. So moving to the right. I'm going to say that case 1 is going to be walking up, and so direction vector is equal to vector3 dot up, which is 0, 1, 0. This is going to be walking left. Direction vector is equal to vector3 dot left. And then the last one is walking down. Direction vector is equal to vector3 dot down. All right, cool. So this is going to set that change direction. Now I'm going to have another method here for move. So we'll call this void move. Nope, I don't want it to be that. I want it to be just move, like I said. All right, and so this is going to be something to move the player. Now, as far as this goes, there was something that was brought up in my Discord by user Jackie about how I could make my code more performant and efficient. And one of the things she brought up is when I'm referring to transform.position or transform.rotation, Unity is really doing a get component behind the scenes. So it would be much easier if I cached that in the start method. And what I mean by cache that is making a reference to it. So since I'm going to be using the transform.position in my start method, actually I'm going to create a variable first. So I'm going to make a private, and I'm going to call this transform my transform. And in my start method, and I could do, it's probably more performant to do this on awake, but I'm going to do it in start. I'm going to say my transform is equal to get component transform. There we go. And then that way, whenever I'm calling transform, I'm not going to do the shorthand transform.position. I'll do my transform.position, and that'll be easier. Now in the move method, what I want to do is, I'm going to need a speed as well. So public float speed. So what I want to do in the move method is I want to move in the direction that we choose, using just move position. Should work just fine. So I'll also need a reference to the rigid body then, because move position is part of rigid body. So private rigid body 2D, my rigid body, and then in here I'll do my rigid body is equal to get component rigid body 2D. All right, and then so in move, what I want to do is say my rigid body dot move position, and the position I want to move to, so this just takes a vector, is going to be my current position. So my transform, no, not my rigid body, my transform dot position plus the direction vector times speed times time dot delta time. There we go. Okay, cool. Now, if I save this, it's not going to work quite the way I want it to, and we'll discuss why that's going to happen. But I'm just going to save this really quickly, pop back into Unity and see if we have any errors. Okay. So, any errors down here? Doesn't look like it. All right, cool. So if I hit play, actually before I can hit play, I need to assign the script to my bounded NPC. Come on now. There we go. And give it a speed, let's say 5. And its signal, I'm going to leave that empty for now. So if I hit play, it should choose a direction and move in it. It's not going to stop at all because I haven't added any interactions to the boundaries, but it should walk in a direction. Okay, so it's not actually moving. I'm what did oh, I'm never actually calling change direction or move. Good Lord. All right, so in my start method, I want to change my direction. So change direction. And then in my update, I want to move. Okay, cool. So back into Unity here. Now, he's only going to have the one animation, but I can fix that really quickly. Or she, or it. Maybe it's an animate doll. That's a pretty fast speed. Let's go way down from there. Let's go 2. So went left that time. This time it's going to go, what direction? Left again. Let's try again. I just want to see it go a different direction than left, and I'll be happy. Nope, still going left. Come on now. There we go. All right, I'm happy. Now, it's not playing the correct animation, so we need to make a reference to the animator. So in Visual Studio, private animator, I'll call it anim, and then I'll set that up here as well. Anim is equal to get component animator. There we go. And then I'm going to make another little method here. And I'm going to say that this is called void update animation. And this is only going to read the direction vector. So I'm going to say anim.set float move x, and I want to set it to direction vector dot x, and anim.set float move y to direction vector dot y. Right. And then I only need to change the animation if I change the direction. I don't need to be calling it every frame. So I'm just going to set it here when I change the direction. So update animation. All right. So I'm going to save that. Now if I go back into Unity, I should see it playing the correct animation. So long as I did this correctly, which who knows if I did. We'll let that think for a second. All right, so if I hit play here. Okay, so correct animation. Now, they're not interacting with the boundary yet. So to get them to interact with the boundary, I need to have some way to check to see if where it wants to move is outside of those bounds, which means I need to have a boundary object to refer to. So this is going to be public, and a collider 2D. I'm going to call this bounds. And then in the move method, there's a way that you can check to see if a position is inside the boundary. And we did this with the area log. So what I want to do is I want to say if bounds.bounds, which is a weird way to do it, dot contains, and the point I want to see if it contains is that point that we want to move to. But rather than typing all that stuff out for that point yet again, I'm just going to cache it as a variable up here really quickly. So I'm going to say vector3 temp is equal to, and I'm going to set that equal to my transform.position plus direction vector times speed times time.double time. So I'm actually going to cut this here, and it looks like I left a little e there. So I'm going to paste, add the e, and then I want to check to see if it contains temp, and I want to move to temp. And if it doesn't contain temp, then I want to change my direction. Else, change direction. So we're checking to see if our boundary has that point in it. And your boundary doesn't have to be a box collider like I did. It could be anything. It could be a circle collider. It could be a polygon collider if you want to have like a specific patrol route. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to go back into Unity. This is going to need to know what its bounds is, so I'm going to assign that. Now let's give it a try. We should see a little more like what we want. Now this tiny bit of AI that we're doing here, this could be added to one of the enemies if you wanted to. This doesn't have to just be for an NPC. So yeah, we're getting this nice little mirror. It's a little random. Okay. All right, so there's that. Now, what I want to do is I want to make sure that if it collides with something, it's going to move in a different direction as well. So, in my method here, I'm going to say void on collision enter 2D. And again, same Discord user, Jackie, pointed out to me that apparently it's a little more performant instead of using collision 2D to just use component. This is the first time I'm trying this, so let's try it out. We're doing something new together here. This is cool, because everything in Unity is a component. So like all of the colliders, all of the collisions, those are all components. So it's supposed to be more performant if you're just addressing the component and not the specific component. So let's check. So on collision enter 2D, what we want to do is change direction. Now, one thing that we are going to want to do is we want to make sure that the direction we change into isn't the direction that we were going, because that can cause this kind of weird stuttering effect. So I'm going to change the direction, and first though, I'm going to store the direction vector into a temporary. So I'm going to make a vector3 temp is equal to direction vector. And then I want to say while temp is equal to direction vector. So if it gives us the same vector back out, then we want to change direction again. And this should be double equals, not single equals. Now with the while loop, there's the risk of having an infinite loop. So I'm going to add a little counter here. So I'm going to say int loops equals 0. And then I'm going to say and loops is less than 100. And then I'm just going to increase loops every time. All right, cool. Now to test this, I'm going to jump into Unity here. Waiting for this to compile. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create another object. So create empty. I'm going to call this a, I don't know, collider test. And I'm going to give this a sprite renderer. And for a sprite, I'll give it that super fancy square that I made. And I'm going to add a box collider 2D to this as well. And I'm going to move it just somewhere in my scene so it's not directly on my player when I start. All right, cool. Oh, script error. Oh, I guess you can't do component. Okay, we learned something. So Unity wants this to be a collision 2D. Collision 2D. All right, cool. So let's go back in here. Let's let that think for a second. The other thing I'd do too is I'd put the NPCs on a different layer than the enemies so that the enemies can't push them around, because the enemies might push them outside of their little patrol zone, their little home area. So that's something I would do. So in my scene here, oh, did I not give this a collider? Did I not give him a collider? Oh, I didn't give him a collider, or her. So that's what I forgot to do. My NPC is going to get a box collider 2D, which is going to be their physics collider. How could I possibly have forgotten to give this little dude a collider? So I'm going to edit it. I'm going to bring it down. I just want it to be at the feet area, because this is just going to be a physics collider. So there we go. All right. Now let's try this. So I'm going to just kind of grab this collider test object and pull it around in the scene. So in my scene view, I'm going to grab my, what's wrong with you now? That's weird. Okay, so he's moving correctly when he runs into stuff, but... Okay, awesome. Get in there. Get in there. What did I do wrong? Huh. So let's pause here and let's talk about debugging a little bit. So right now I have all those variables private. I could set them to be serialized fields, in which case they would be private but still viewable and editable in the inspector. I'm going to take the shortcut, and on my NPC I'm going to go this little tab up here in the upper right, and I'm going to choose debug, and I want to see... Alright, so the direction vector is 0, 1, 0, so it should be going up. It knows what everything is. Huh. I wonder why it's doing that. What did I do wrong? So, on collision, enter 2D, collision 2D. Yeah, I didn't change that. While temp is equal to direction vector. Yeah, because we would change direction after we cached temp. I wonder, I'm just going to add a little debug message here. I know it's not the best debug message, but it lets me see if it's where it is in the code. So let's hit play. And before I use that collider, I just want to see, oh, is it because, did I not set this boundary to be a trigger? I didn't, that's why. Okay, he was colliding with the boundary, that's what it was. Mr. Taft, what are you doing? So, there we go. Now it's not going to actually register a collision. So if I go to my scene though, and I put this little dude right there. Okay. So we've got some kind of random walking behavior. It's a little bit intelligent. Alright, so now the last thing I want to do is I want to make the NPC stop when the player is in range. And I don't actually need to add the player for this, because I have all of this. Oh yeah, one more thing too. If you go into debug and then you notice that your transform's gone super weird, go to this, set it back to normal. So what I'm going to do is, this already has a signal to tell it if, or not a signal, but it already has code to tell it if the player's in range. So all I really have to do, and I think it's player in range. I forgot what I named that variable. So on NPC, yeah, I called it player in range. So I'm just going to create a little method here to say whether or not the NPC can move, or not a method, a bool. So this is going to be a private bool can move, and I'm going to default it to false, no, true. And then in update, I'm going to say if player in range. Actually, I guess I don't need to do that. I can just say if not player in range, then move. And I don't need that little Boolean value. Yeah, I think I can get rid of this. All right, cool. I love it when I figure out a way to do something easier than I was doing it in my notes. So let's go back here. And to test this out, I don't need to put my player in the scene. Instead, I can just take my collider test and tag it as player, because that's what it's based on. Now, before I can play though, I need to have a trigger collider attached to the NPC, because without that trigger collider, player in range is never going to be tripped. So in my NPC, I'm going to add a second collider that's going to be specifically for detecting the player. And it doesn't have to be a box. I'm going to make this one a circle. And yeah, I'm fine with it being that big. So let's hit play. So our little duder here is going to walk around. I'm going to grab my collider test, and I want to make sure that if I'm the player, oh, nope, okay, awesome. Oh, I didn't set that sphere collider to be a trigger. All right. Sphere collider, or not sphere, circle collider is a trigger. All right, there we go. You guys are getting some good debug feedback here. All right, so I'm going to go to the scene view and the player. Oh, object not set to a reference of an object. No reference exception. Interactable line 24. So let's look at the interactable script. What did I forget to do? I think it's that signal, but objects interactable. Okay, yeah, it's the context flag. So yeah, I still want to raise that context flag though. So I'm going to go to my NPC, my scriptable objects, my signals, my context clue. That's what I want this to be. So now, even though this little collider test object doesn't have a context signal on it, it's not going to break anything because it's raising a flag and there's nothing in the scene that's listening for that flag. But the NPC doesn't need to know whether that flag was received. It just needs to send out that flag. So imagine this is the player. You're walking up. Enemy stops walking. Or not enemy, NPC stops walking. I always hated it. I think it was in like Final Fantasy 4 or 6. There was one village where there was one NPC you had to talk to, and for some reason I always had it so that they were walking away from me at my exact same speed, and I have found it so frustrating. So there we go. Now from here we can add some of the sign stuff to make it work like a sign, so that if we're in range, we press space or whatever our submit button was, we'll get a little bit of dialogue. So we'll do that next time. For now though, we've got this nice little NPC here. Now, before I go too much further, I'm going to grab my NPC, go to my prefabs, which are here, and I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this NPC, and I'll add my little NPC holder to that folder. So there we go. Cool. All right. Thank you very much for watching. I covered the making of these notes on a Twitch stream earlier this week. So if you'd like, I will put a link in the description to my Twitch channel. Go ahead and follow me on there. I'm going to be intermittently making Twitch streams. I'm going to try on Saturdays to stream the development of my own game, which I'll talk about more this Saturday. I'm not ready to talk about titles or really anything about it yet, but I will stream the development of it, at least part of it, on Saturday, this coming Saturday, which is April 6th. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the description down below. You can follow me on Twitter to find out when I post new videos. You can join my Discord. Lots of fun people talking about lots of cool stuff with this project and how they're expanding it. So yeah, thanks very much. Have yourselves a wonderful day. If you enjoyed this video, consider giving a like, subscribing to the channel, or telling a friend who might be interested. Also, please consider following me on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can earn access to tangible rewards, like early access to videos, backer-only videos and series, polls for future topics, streams, and even individual tutoring sessions. You can find a link to that in the description. And as always, have yourselves a wonderful day.